We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners, Burke Financial Partners. This is the Finances podcast, and I'm your host, Jay Burke. I've got a new co-host, Shay Darren.
Yep, well done. Second time on.
Not Duran. Shay Darren, and our guest today is Tom Lim. Tom is Managing Director of CPG Sports Management. Have I got that right, Tom?
That's correct.
Yeah, with a focus predominantly on AFL and AFLW athletes. Now, Shay sent me a bit of a bio of you. I'm going to let him... Are we allowed to call you a local football legend? I think, that's valid, isn't it?
He can have it. There's a nice video on that you've put on your own website.
I did watch the video. When I actually went to find your bio, I saw your little 200th game video. It was good.
Yeah, special call out to Matt Gibbs.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting that together. Well. He did that well, yeah.
If we do ever need anything put together, maybe we get in touch with Matthew.
No, very good. So how about you give your best bio for Tom, given that you're one of his best mates?
So I grew up watching Tom play footy. He played footy with my brother. So kind of grew up almost idolising Tom as a footballer and then getting to know him eventually and gradually. Also realised that he was a really nice guy. So grew up with Tom, now become mates, and watching him take steps into his own business is pretty exciting, knowing how well he did with me and countless other junior footballers. Imagine if I had more footy talent where I could be. So if only you picked me up 10 years earlier, but oh well.
Yeah. Oh, very good. I think one of the emphasis we've tried with this podcast is it's a financial planner or a financial planning business. The topics generally relate to financial planning, but broadly speaking, we want to give shine a spotlight on local businesses. We want to give a boost businesses signal, and also we want to hear from interesting people doing interesting things. So that's you, Tom. So we always like to, I know we've sort of edged on the fact that you've recently gone down the path of sports management. But before we get there, let's expand on what Shay just covered off on with your history. So where were you born? Where'd you go to school? How'd you grow up? Let's go way back when.
Way back. Okay, way back. Born in Frankston, of all places. Franger boy.
Yeah.
Was there till I was 4 and then moved country down a place called Wallasdale, which is southwest Victoria, well past Hamilton, and spent about 4 years there. Mum and Dad, teachers, were following kind of teaching jobs at that stage, and Dad landed the principal job at Queenscliff Primary School when I was about 8. So moved to Queenscliff when I was 8 and have been there ever since. Grew up in Queenscliff, spent 4 years in Ballarat studying university, and took the opportunity there to play at North Ballarat in the VFL system when they were in the system at that stage. And then any opportunity to move back down to the coast after university, I took it, and we just gradually, my wife, we both just kind of gradually made the move back to Point Lonsdale, so to Geelong, to Leopold, to Point Lonsdale, until we got there.
So there's a fairly big draw of the coast. Do you remember much about your Frankston days, and where was the country?
Wallasdale. Frankston, not so much until I was 4, but Wallasdale, yeah, enjoyed I think there was 14 students at the school.
Was your old man teaching you then, or was Queenscliff the first time you had him?
No, he and Mum were the two teachers at the school. I think our house was on the same property as the school. The neighbours were a few kilometres away. Dad played at Branksome Wallasdale. Yeah, and I used to go and instead of running water as a child, you'd run PK or chewing gum. Yeah, because none of them had mouth guards. They'd chew on the gum, so you'd
stick it under their gum.
Yeah. Yep, that's my memory of Branksome Wallasdale. But yeah, then off to Queenscliff, where I'm not sure Dad ever taught me at Queenscliff, but I guess there for the rest of the time.
So your mum and dad were both fairly sports orientated. So your dad was playing footy when you were in the country. Like every kid who's grown up in the country, generally there's a sort of a sporting community that's the hub of all community connection. Is that your earliest recollection of being really into sport and community? Or was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Sport's a big part of the community. You know, in the country, even more so. It's a place that everyone goes and gathers on a Saturday. And Dad heavily involved in football all the way through. From my earliest memories, he's always been involved in some capacity in sport. Mum likewise, but more so Dad. You know, from either coaching under 18s, president of the club. More recently, he hasn't been involved in the local club because he's, holds an administration role within the league, but always involved in some capacity with sport.
What's your dad doing now?
He's at AFL Barwon.
Okay.
He's ops manager there.
Yeah. Does he enjoy that?
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I think he's been there. I'll probably get the time wrong, but he's probably been there for 2 decades.
So how old's your dad?
66.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's kind of the same ilk as Peter. My dad.
Yep.
Maybe they've...
He's probably seen your name in the tribunal column once or twice, maybe.
Maybe. I think I only got reported twice. 2 weeks. That's it. I wasn't a bad boy. I was all good. So that's kind of brings us to Queenscliff. And when you got to Queenscliff, you folks, you said, got roles in the local school?
Heavily involved in the school, heavily involved in the football netball club at the time. Yeah, it wasn't too long till Dad was, I think, president of the Queenscliff Football Netball Club.
Was he playing at that stage or had he finished?
No, he'd finished. He was a bit too old at that stage to be playing football still. My eldest brother, I feel like they played a game together, but that was down at Branksome Wallasdale. I don't think we've ever played a game together. He hasn't played with any of his children, so I'm one of 4 boys, and we've got a sister as well, so one of 5 kids. Yeah, but didn't get the opportunity to play with him at Queenscliff.
How'd you find growing up with 4 siblings? That's probably I've got 5 kids now, and it's abnormal. It's abnormal to have 5 kids, but back when you were growing up in the country, it was probably
a bit normal. Yeah, I mean, I'm the 4th of 4 boys, and then I've got a younger sister. So I had 3 older brothers who, took any opportunity to put me back in my place, and always had to work hard to compete against them or kind of earn my own opportunity. But my younger sister at the same time was pretty quick to put me in my place as well. So I was kind of caught in the middle.
And are they all talented sports people in their own right?
No, they're no good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure this one gets through to Rog.
Yeah, no, look, they've all done well in their own right, whether that be footy or other sporting. So I think coaching, playing, yeah.
And then you said primary school in Queenscliff, high school at Queenscliff as well?
Yes. Queenscliff High School, I think my second eldest was the last one to go to Queenscliff High School, but Queenscliff High kind of closed, but turned into Ballerine Secondary College.
Yes.
And I went through Ballerine Secondary College all the way through.
So when you were finishing school, obviously sport was massive. Did you finish year 12?
I did.
Yeah. And when you're in year 11, year 12, did you know what you wanted to do?
That stage, I was kind of still hopeful to be playing football at some level and didn't have a clear view, but I knew football was a passion of mine and something that I wanted to pursue or follow. I probably had a few options at that stage. I did a week's work experience as a chippy. 2 of my brothers are carpenters and soon realised that probably wasn't for me.
Did you do the work experience with your brothers?
No, I didn't. I did it with Steve Clark Otis, who was a coach at the time. It was a great experience. Enjoyed the week, but...
Not for you?
Not for me.
Leave it at a week.
Yeah.
So, no to carpentry.
No to carpentry, considered teaching.
Were your parents encouraging you to get into teaching?
Clearly, when you've got 2 parents as teachers, you're thinking, what do I do? There's teaching's an option.
Yep.
And the other brother is a teacher as well. But the interest around sport was kind of what continued to draw me toward sports science. So I went to Ballarat and started a double degree in sports science and business management. So I guess I wanted the double degree because I was unsure yet exactly where it was going to take me, but there was something about business management and sports science.
Was that the human movement course in Ballarat?
Yeah, so sports science was a human movement and it had the double degree element to it, so business management as well.
So in the timeline, how long ago is this?
2009.
Okay.
Yep.
And so you finished your degree?
So 2006 to 2009.
Okay. So you went to uni, you did the double degree, you came back after that, and where did that then lead you?
But yeah, I landed a graduate position in a role that kind of combined both my sports science, injury management knowledge and business management in terms of managing businesses and people.
Okay. And that brings us up to when? How long were you in that role?
Still to today.
Okay.
With the same organisation, held a number or various roles during that time, to more recently where I've got a team of 50-odd people and kind of managing people and supporting people.
Yep. So you obviously nurtured this idea of being in sort of sports management for a while. It's been bubbling around in your head since you left school and you went to uni, and it's been 12, 13, 14 years in the making. Maybe talk through maybe the last few years in your decisions about why there was an opportunity to actually get into professional sports and athletes management.
Yeah, so timing's everything. something my wife and I discussed for some time around how do we align our passions, our interests, as well as our skill sets. What's something that we could do together that combines all those things and kind of sets up our own business, our own company. And my wife brings an element of wellbeing. She's doing a master's in adolescent health and wellbeing. And obviously with my passion with football and sports management, we explored a few different options and, we kind of went down the pathway of sports management.
We kind of missed a fairly significant part of your timeline there when Bianca's your wife.
Bianca's my wife, yes.
So let's do a quick rewind to, you mentioned your 3 or 4 kids.
3 kids.
So your 3 kids and Bianca. So let's slot Bianca and the kids into the timeline of the last decade.
So I met Bianca at university.
She's a Ballarat girl?
No, she's a Geelong girl, Little River, out that side of Geelong. Met her at the start of uni. We were soon engaged, married within 4 years, pretty quick time frame. And just kind of moved back here together.
Yep.
The 3 kids, we've got a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So we're a pretty busy household.
So hence
at the
my life's
moment.
pretty busy.
Yeah, so girl, boy and loving it, but very busy.
Okay. So when you've got 3 young kids, you've got a solid role. Why would you throw into the mix starting your own business in sports management?
Yeah, so now's the time. The youngest is 2. The eldest is starting school. So whilst it's a busy time, it's also a time where my wife is also at that crossroads of thinking about what's next. So studying a master's, but also looking about what the next career move is for her.
Is Bianca on leave at the moment while she's studying? Okay.
Yes. Yep. And so obviously on leave, but also caring for children. And so it was just the opportunity to start where she can also do a lot of the business grunt work and keep things moving. The opportunity to kind of start now with a plan for 2-3 years, really kind of setting up the business.
Yeah. There's kind of some interesting parallels between parents trying to find that transition out of what they've done for a period of time, almost to with professional athletes, that window of time that they're with parents and with mothers particularly, where they've got a role and then that role finishes and the transition needs to occur.
I was just going to say that's a big part of the role as a player manager. You're supporting people through moments that matter in their life, and that's either into a new role where they're professional athletes or life after football in this instance.
So maybe talk to specifically for those people who don't know what a sports management is all about and the areas of support that you actually provide. Maybe let's run through what are the types of services that you are providing and the type of counsel that you offer to professional athletes.
Yep. So I think what's well known is a big part of the role is around contract negotiation, supporting a player who has the opportunity to earn and get value from, their abilities at that point in time. So you're clearly working with them around achieving value through a contract and making sure that they're in a job for as long as they can be and getting value for that. And the other component is around commercial opportunity. So how do you build their brand? How do you ensure that during this short window of opportunity that they're also maximising the commercial value through partnerships, sponsorships and the like. So that's, they're the areas of sports management that people well know. The lens that we also bring to that is around wellbeing. These are young people generally going into a new environment with high profile, high income, high expectations on them as individuals. And it's how we kind of support those individuals and build individual plans, because they've all got different backgrounds, they've all got different risks associated, from a wellbeing perspective, and it's how you support them navigate through those early phases. But then life after football, football's only a short career.
Where do you begin that transition? Obviously, with Bianca, she hasn't waited for the kids to head off to school to then say, that's what I'm doing next. She's doing it before they all head off. When do you start that with a player? Is it as soon as they come into the league, you say you're only here for 2 or 3 years, maybe? Do we start now? Do we start in 2 or 3 years? Where does that begin?
Yeah, obviously there's a settling in time for the player. So they're about to start a new career. You don't want to, straight away start talking about life after football and getting them into training. But, you can start that conversation. But initially the initial phase is about settle into a new environment, socially kind of integrate with the playing group and support them through there. But I'd definitely be saying toward the end of that first year and then into the second year, you're starting to talk about goal setting and where they want to develop and focus after footy. And it may not be in a full-blown course straight away, but what are some things that they might want to start doing or where do you start focusing on. The other component, and clearly linked here, is financial planning, and how do you set them up, knowing that for a short period of time they're going to be well set up from an income perspective. And so how do you start doing that forward planning to make sure that they're not left high and dry post-football?
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking back to sort of the origin story of this business. When Peter, my dad's a teacher, he was a teacher, and he left being a teacher and he went into a sports management degree. So he studied with David Matthews, who's the GWS CEO. They're good mates because David Matthews was the CEO of the GFL for a number of years. And we had a fairly significant interest in the AFL Players Association superannuation, so we had a lot of connections with them. And one of the things you realise is that the pointy end of the industry, not everyone's going to be in the industry for 10 to 15 years. Like the Joel Selwoods of the world.
Rare. Very
rare. And unfortunately, I'm assuming a lot of, or from my experience, a lot of kids have that thought or that ambition that this will last forever. Like I'm going to be just like Joel Selwood, I'm going to earn $1 million a year and I'm going to be in for, a decade and a half, when the reality, I'm not sure whether you've got any stats on that, what the average time frame of a professional athlete is, but I'm assuming that on average they're spending 2 or 3 years in the system and then they're out.
Yeah, I think 4 to 6 potentially, but it's definitely, there's a lot of kids that come in and they're in the system for 2 years. Like that would be, I think if you think of the bell curve, there'd be a fair few down toward that 2 to 3 years as well. It's a balance of how you set that expectation of reality versus not wanting to also burst their bubble around what is an exciting time in their life, something that should be a positive experience and something that they reflect back on and go, I really got the most out of that time and that opportunity to be a professional athlete.
Yeah, I think regardless of the outcome, if it's 2 years, 15, whatever, you just want them to look back positively, say, I did what I could. If I didn't get as far as I thought I would, that's fine, but I didn't leave anything hanging around at all.
Yeah,
I think that's probably a pretty positive outlook to have.
Absolutely, and it's a mindset thing as well. It's how do they leave the game knowing that they've taken every opportunity that they could, and from a performance perspective, delivered in that space as well. But leave also with knowing that there's challenges that come post football, but they're set up well to kind of navigate through that period as well.
The thought in my mind initially when I think about sports management is that very clinical, commercial reality of player management, like contracts. And I like you said, the ability to actually link in Bianca's skill set with your own skill set, because when they're individuals, they're young individuals that actually need sort of business and commercial support, but they also need that social, emotional, financial well-being. There's a very well-rounded, I know it's a bit jargonistic, but in our world of sort of financial planning is not really financial planning at all. Like it's lifestyle planning. It's about actually surrounding people with the right counsel so that they can be supported where they need it. I know when we start to focus on financial planning alone, Shay and I were having a meeting the other day talking about people who are on a high level of income potentially for a short period of time. One of the issues that we see is that it's very, very easy to grow into an income. It's very, very hard to grow out of expenses. And that education process for anyone, whether they're professional athletes or they're just someone that's come into a large income stream or they've had a significant increase in their disposable income, getting around them and supporting them so that they can make good decisions, which then flow on to making good lifestyle decisions, which then set them up for the future. You and I obviously preach this a lot, but it's so critical and so important.
And it's real for everyone, as you say. Like personally, find that same challenge when you're used to a certain income and you plan for a certain income and you've got certain expenses that then come with that. And, you look back to our uni days and you think, how did we survive off the income that you had at that stage? But the fact is you did, because you had different expenses and you had different expectations at that point in time. And the hard thing to manage is when expectations change and all of a sudden when you start on a particular income, it's pretty hard to then adjust.
Particularly for a lot of these kids, they're earning $15 an hour at Safeway. This is going to be their first actual income. That's a huge expectation to kind of get pushed down and say, that's not real life. This isn't forever. How do you kind of manage that? Just saying that, look, you got a good 5 years of doing that.
Yeah, whilst at the same time, not like you said, not bursting their bubble and saying, hey, you should also enjoy this. You enjoy the fruits of your effort and your labour, but there's that balance which, again, comes back to why having counsel like yourself around them is so important, just to point them in the right direction.
That's right, and definitely my role is not to be a financial planner for them, to make sure, though, that they're getting expert advice and opinion as well.
What are the other areas you talked about, sort of the social, emotional well-being side of things, the contract support? What are some of the other areas you see as or opportunities that aren't really being addressed in this sort of sports management area at the moment that could be?
Yeah. I guess our niche market, or where we think the greatest opportunity is, and not to say that the other areas are not doing it, but it's definitely where we'll focus most of our attention is in that wellbeing kind of support. So I think I think players are pretty well supported around contract negotiation and commercial partnerships.
Yep.
The other part is around branding. And so how everything in terms of maximising the value for that player, it kind of comes back to the brand that player has also built. So it's how you work with them around media engagements. There's an expectation around how they might want to or need to communicate and talk to the media, how you get the media on side. So it's working with them through that phase as well. Social media is a big platform that maybe wasn't there 15, 20 years ago. So it's how you support them around the use of social media. Now, all clubs will also have different support avenues. AFL Players Association is a really good resource and support. And as a player manager, you're helping them navigate and get the support they need.
The social media environment, you can clearly see the opportunities, particularly when you talk about branding. I mean, that's got to be just a whole new world for kids coming into the professional sports world. What are you talking about, like branding and image and the need to sort of manicure their presence in the world, but also the obvious threats, of doing we've seen it, people doing the wrong thing with the use of social media.
And I think this is where it comes to an individual preference, and this is the individual case planning that I'll do with each player, is some will want to have a high profile and really want to maximise any commercial agreements or partnerships, but others may want to remain more hidden.
So what kind of conversation would you be having with a potential young professional athlete around that? Like how do you get to the point of deciding how they want to present to the world?
So there's clearly different goal-setting conversations that you want to have, but it all comes down to what are their values, what do they actually want to get out of their time in football, and you'll clearly, through that, pick up risk factors or barriers that might present around that individual.
So example being?
Depending on their upbringing, kind of what family environment they have around them, their education and their education background. I think this is where my wife probably has greater strength around what she calls a heads assessment, where she just tries to understand what are some of the potential risks or barriers that might sit around an individual so that you can be proactive in your planning. Or also, if you think about a high-profile player who's about to start in the industry, there's a risk around betting, gambling, there's other illicit drug risks that may be there, and every individual is different in terms of how exposed they may be to some of those risks. So that's where getting a high profile also comes with high scrutiny. And so if they aren't in a headspace to be able to manage that high scrutiny, then you may want to think about how they present themselves or maximise the use of social media for other commercial deals.
You can certainly see how player management's as much psychological management, and the need to surround people with that psychological support is critical.
Yeah, it's definitely where we see our role. It's definitely where we see value in our role. From a value perspective in terms of contract negotiation and commercial agreements, comfortable in where we'll be able to work with clubs and different companies to kind of maximise the value for our players. But I think where the biggest opportunity or where the risk is for players is in that psychological space.
Yep. We probably should have had Bianca on the podcast
Possibly,
as well.
yeah.
Part two.
Yeah, part two, definitely. I was just thinking about probably it's a question that I would want to ask of Bianca about whether or not, obviously mental health is a significant issue in today's environment, and whether or not the thought is that there is a higher prevalence of mental health today as a result of the likes of social media, or we're just doing a better job of recognising existing mental health concerns that people have. Again, it's probably a question.
I was going to say that's it's a good question, and it's definitely something that I think that Bianca would be able to better answer than what I could. But I agree with you. I mean, there's greater awareness around mental health, which is really positive. But there's also different channels and different avenues that could possibly expedite or increase the harm around mental health as well.
Yep. Do you see any other significant opportunities in the player management space? You've said about the psychological, mental well-being. Yep. Are there any other things that you can see that value could be added?
Yeah. So life after football is the other big part that we'll be focused on very early. Again, the timing's got to be right. You're not straight into it, but it's working with them around what are their life goals. So separate to mental health and transition and supporting them through some big moments. But from a very early stage, you're going separate to footy. What are you working toward? Like what, if you reflect back, what do you want to be known for? What are the things that you want to achieve? And so you're starting to work at an early stage around life goals. And so obviously you're not going to be with them forever as a player manager, but, I'd imagine being a family business, any player that we work with will continue to have some sort of involvement with post-football.
I was just about to ask, what do you think your relationship with players looks like moving post them finishing up their actual career? They might still have potential media,
business
to
interests,
do other business interests. They might still get some money from endorsements and the like. What do you see as yours and Bianca's input or relationship with those players?
Yeah, I mean, personally, hopefully you've set those players up to be able to navigate through either their own personal career, and whether that's then negotiating a career wage or whatever that may be. But it will be individual and depend on that player. So, if you think about some players in the industry at the moment, their next career move is in media, coaching, and, a lot of those people do have representation still. So if that player sees a value in needing a continuation of support and representation, then we'll continue to support them.
Yeah, so it's almost people management in that sense. It's not just the player aspect of it.
Yeah, and there's time management. Some of these players are in high demand. You've got a lot of people contacting them, wanting an interview, wanting them to come to the school. So you're navigating those logistics and making sure that you're getting the most out of their time as well.
How do you find the younger individuals go with goal setting beyond very short term?
It's a challenge. Yeah. So, I guess I spent time as a coach for 4 years at Queenscliff. Got to work with a lot of young kids at that stage, and we're all being young kids at a point in time, and where you think you're only thinking a year ahead or even a couple of weeks ahead at that stage. So, and the way they communicate is different as well. So learning the different communication styles and how they want to interact with you, and goal setting, like as terms like that, doesn't necessarily resonate with them. So it's just how you frame it up, and it may not be a formal kind of, we're going to go through goal setting. And
what kind of verbiage are they talking about when we say goal setting?
I wouldn't even know how they would term it really, but it's just, you can do goal setting without them realising you're doing goal setting. And I think that's really the natural conversation and the relationships that we build. And if I go back to Connect, Perform, Grow, CPG, I guess the essence and the foundations around why we've labelled our business Connect, Perform, Grow is the first step is around connection. And so we connect, working with the player around their personal relationships, what professional relationships are there, as well as connection to self. So it's all about networks, relationships, and that's where the wellbeing part comes in as well, around self-identity and knowing who they are. The perform part then goes into, setting them up to perform, so removing distractions and allowing them to get the best performance. And then grow is obviously the growth, financially, life after football, etc.
The deferred reward stuff, which is always the hardest to wrap your head around as a kid.
As a young kid. So you're focused on the connection early, building connection with the individual, trying to understand what are their values and dreams, so to speak, and, might be pretty limited at that point in time, but it comes through in questioning and asking the right questions.
It's interesting the parallels between our initial consultation or communication with clients, that the first hour or two that we spend with someone is actually connecting with them and actually working out at a base level whether we can trust each other, and then working from that about what their goals might be and trying to help them. Most of our clients really find it difficult to articulate, their short, medium and long-term goals or the goal setting. And it's in those conversations, like it sounds that you have with your athletes, where you can help them formulate their short, medium, longer-term goals and then surround them with the support so that they can focus on what they're good at. They can go and do what they need to do and be supported and counselled with all the peripheral stuff.
Yeah, I mean, short-term goals are quick. I want to play AFL football or AFLW. So, I think the key there is, what are the actions that you need to take that are going to help you deliver on that, and how do you know you've been successful, and really allowing them to take ownership and accountability of the things that they need to do in order to achieve that. So I guess a goal is, I want to play AFL football, but what are your goals that you're trying to deliver that's going to enable you? Because
allowing them to see the progression and what the stepping stone might be, and then saying, all right, we'll tick these little ones off, knowing that that's where we actually want to go. That's the longer term, even though it might be a year or two really.
Yeah.
But you can set the smaller ones, stepping stones, off we go.
and accepting that things outside of your control at the same time as well. So if you set a goal to play AFL or AFLW, there are things inside and outside of your control with that. So what are the things within your control that you need to focus on?
Yeah. On the AFLW, I was just thinking about to what degree are players in the AFLW represented with player management? Is it the majority? Is it a minority?
At this stage, it's about half.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be about 50% are represented within the AFLW system. And that would be growing.
Okay. Is there an emphasis or a push from the AFLW itself to help those players get represented, or is it left to the individuals to go and source that themselves?
It'd be with the individuals. The AFL Players Association is there as a collective support for those players. If you think, from my perspective anyway, historically with the AFLW, it's growing, and there's been pretty standard contract arrangements, tier-based, yearly kind of contracts. Mm-hmm. There possibly hasn't been a need for player management representation, but as it continues to grow,
as it relates to the commercial side of it.
Correct. But from a wellbeing perspective, balancing your professional job whilst also trying to go into a professional AFL system, the demands now on AFLW continues to grow and remuneration is growing with that, but there's still a need for a lot of them to have a professional job. Plus there's value in having a professional career. So how do you hold on to that? So navigating that from a wellbeing perspective is big.
Okay. How competitive is the sports management environment? Is it dog eat dog out there, or at the moment is there an underrepresentation because there's not enough sports management out there to look after some of the athletes?
I think that's pretty well. There's a fair representation within the market. There's firms that have been doing it for a long time, and they're good at what they do. But I think there is an opportunity within the AFLW market at the moment, and that's the market that grows. And, as I personally feel, there's an opportunity within the AFL men's market as well, and hence the lens of the wellbeing component that we bring to that.
Particularly as you see the AFL clubs bring in more in-house psychologists, sports psychs, you can see they'd be a lot happier to lean on a player representation that's going to be focused on the wellbeing. There's not going to be a shortage of people helping you out with your mental well-being. So it probably is a pretty good being an outlier in that sense.
Yeah, and to be honest, most clubs are pretty well resourced and set up to support players as they join the system. Some clubs do it better than others, but they'll have development managers that are working around life after football for that player. They have, as you mentioned, they have either psychologists or people available from a mental health perspective to support those individuals. And as a player manager, you're working closely with the clubs and the key people in the club to make sure you've got a collective view on where that
and
player...
tying it all in for that one individual, knowing that all your players are different.
Correct.
And you just have to tie in the different entities that they're dealt with. Yep.
That's correct.
Maybe a little bit of a left turn in terms of the mechanics of how athletes find you, and then how they engage with you, and then how you, I suppose commercially, how you operate. How do they engage you? How do they pay you for your services? How does it look?
Yep. So it's very well regulated, which is part of coming into the industry, to be honest. Getting to better understand the industry and the AFL Players Association's role in the industry, it was quite positive. So there's a lot of rules and regulations around when and how you can approach certain players. There's things like a portal available where you can contact players through that portal. But from my perspective, it's going out, it's watching a lot of football, trying to learn the potential talent that's coming through. And then when you're ready to approach, you've got to approach through the right channels at the right age. And so there's a lot of rules and regulations around that. If a player reaches out to you, then it's just making sure that they're going through the right channels and making sure that there's an element of protecting children, or shouldn't call them children, but protecting adolescents and kids as they transition into the high talent pathways, and making sure that they're not just getting contacted by anyone.
How long has that portal been in play? Obviously that wouldn't have been the case 15 years ago. Players would have been getting calls at all ages, 16, 17-year-olds. When's the portal kind of come into?
It's a more recent introduction. I don't know exactly when it came in, but it's a more recent introduction. But there's always been strong guidelines around the portal's made it easier to see which players have already signed with an agent, which players are open to approaches, which players are just kind of just wanting to be left alone for the time being, and that makes it easier to see. Otherwise, you'd go through the talent manager at the talent club.
I don't think we talked about your degree, but we didn't talk about formal accreditation when it comes to player management. So there is a formal accreditation process that every player manager has to go through. What is that process? When did you do it? How was it? And was it worthwhile doing in setting you up to do your role as it is now?
Yeah, absolutely worthwhile doing. Mid last year, there was run through the AFLPA, but also aligned through university as well. It's a kind of a feeder into a master's in sports management if you choose to go on and do that. It's essentially an equivalent to a module. I think if you think about a unit within university, and it's an intense, I think for a few days, you're pretty much in, because it was all run online, back-to-back Zoom meetings. But for me, it reinforced what I was getting into, because every single session that they ran was actually of quite interest to me, and it just reinforced that I was, this is all interesting, this is something I'm interested in, and when you've got interest and passion in something, you get more out of it. But yet there's an exam. It's quite a challenging exam. I think it's not a very high pass rate. You've got to get to a high benchmark to kind of get through.
I know you said that AFLW is probably the focus. Can you, talking longer term thinking, do you envisage a time in the medium to distant future where you're expanding your network of influence to other sporting fields and maybe not only domestic but international, or am I pushing that too hard?
Well, it's all goal setting, isn't it? Short, medium, long term. And, they're definitely in the short and medium term is AFL, because that's where my interest is. That's kind of what I know, and that's my background. But long term, absolutely, if there's an opportunity to expand outside of AFL, my nephew has started Gridiron, who knows, might need a manager to support him to get across to the college system and then beyond. But at this stage, it's predominantly AFL.
Okay. I was saying to Shay the other day that I was listening to a more controversial player manager in Ricky Nixon talking on Sam Newman's podcast he was talking about, I think he has a formal accreditation. I'm not sure whether it's associated with the AFLPA, but saying just how potentially lucrative but also supportive opportunities there could be for those people like your nephew that may be talented in other fields, and being able to link up with agents overseas. Obviously, he was talking much more on the commercial side of things. Didn't really talk too much about mental health and well-being, but at the end of the day, you are running a commercial operation and it's got to be profitable. So you've got to make sure that whatever you do is in everyone's best interest. Yep. Just on that, so I think I did hear on that podcast about that there is, as far as rules and regulations, there's actually is an agreed formula of how much player manager can receive from a contract. Is that right, or have I got that totally wrong?
There's a recommended range that's on there. But it's, so the way, I guess, to the question around how you generate an income and how people pay for the service. So I'll work with any player who's interested in getting drafted. In the event that they do get drafted and they get on an AFL list, then it's commission-based on that. So you typically taking a percentage of the contract, and that's pretty standard, around that 3 to 5%.
Okay. And then commercial arrangements outside of the contract, do they come under a different legislation or rule set?
So there's a standard player agreement that you sign with the player, and so you work through that with the player from front to back, and that's kind of a standard agreement that the Players Association has. And if you think about the Players Association, they're there on behalf of the collective players, so there's a standard agreement that you kind of sign with the player linked to that. But as you say, there's different things within that. So there's, if you're contract negotiation, you have a percentage associated with that, and if there's commercial agreements, there's generally a different percentage associated with that, which could be anywhere from 10 to 20%.
Okay, cool. And in your circumstance, which sounds quite unique, when someone engages you, they don't just get a player manager, they're getting the duo of Bianca and yourself, which is a pretty strong benefit for anyone that engages you.
Yeah, that's what we think, and definitely it's a family business, and you're joining the family, so to speak, and the skills that I bring are different to the skills that Bianca brings, and the benefit of joining us is you get both.
Have you ever worked with Bianca before?
I think we spent 1 week together during uni working in.
How did that go?
I think she finished first, and then
Okay.
I finished not long after. But
So we're going into uncharted territories. I'm sure you'll be fine. Well, we've been going for nearly an hour. We might wrap up with a few closing comments. Shay, you want to add anything before I wrap things up for Tom?
Not too much. Just looking forward to the next chapter. I know I'll see you pretty frequently around Point Lonsdale, but looking forward to keeping the chat going with CPG, and maybe Bianca comes in next time.
I think that would be a good idea. We might get in trouble if we don't. For all of those out there listening, Tom, where can people find you on the socials and the interwebs, and how can someone get in contact with you and Bianca if they want to engage your services?
Yeah, so cpgsports.com.au is the web. There's, I don't know the Insta handle or the Facebook handle, but I'm sure I can provide all those for you to have on the website.
Yep.
But yeah, the website has all the contact details and how you can get in contact with us.
Beautiful. Well, listen, it was great to chat with you for an hour. It's always nice to hear about a different industry, one that we're probably not always associated with. So thanks for coming in. Thanks for the chat. Shay, thanks for arranging it. And like Shay said, look forward to seeing the progression of CPG over the coming years, and hopefully we can work in close with you wherever you need us and we need you in the future. So, Tom, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you having me both.
Cheers,
Thanks
mate.
for coming in.
Appreciate both of you having me.
All good, mate. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks.
Cheers. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Burke Britain FP, or Google Burke Britain Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility. Do your homework. Ask questions and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PB Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britain Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.